I always forget to check and see how long it actually takes for the stream to go live. So I feel like at least the last two times it's been like 10 seconds that I'm just standing there. So if you have to sort of watch that part, my apologies. I'll try and remember next time to see what the count actually is. But hello, welcome. How are you doing today? I don't really have a pattern for doing these lives. Right now, my commitment is doing them once a week. So here we are. And we are going to be continuing this series on cultivating essence, cultivating the qualities of being of who we are. Um, and we're on part two. We're on having a discussion today about how we disconnect from our essence. So if you haven't caught the first video, I'll make sure to put a link to it in the comments below. Really would invite you to check it out. It's a cool video that sort of gets into the topic of what is essence, how does essence serve us in our life, how can we get more deeply connected to our essence as well. So like I said, I'll put a link in that in the comments once I'm done this one, so you can go back and check that out if you haven't, because there's some great practices or action steps that you can take at the end that will sort of guide you into these next videos. So whether you're catching this live or you catch this on the replay, let me know. Let me know that you're watching these videos, what your takeaways are, any questions that you have, and I'll make sure to answer them. I obviously really appreciate, the feedback and the interaction on these videos, because you know what? They get kind of, one-sided, so to speak. And my ask for the audience is basically, if you've been watching my videos or checking out any of the content that I'm writing, um, feel free to give me some ideas of content that you'd like to see, topics that you would like me to speak on, or just that we get to be in conversation around, because that is what makes this really fun, is when those topics come from you, because I live my own life. I have my own way of thinking about things or seeing things, and you do too. And so I'd love to know what's going on in your life, where you could get some support, that kind of thing. So you can do that by putting in the comments, sending me a message, that type of thing, whatever, whatever feels right to you. So let's dive in. So I'm going to do a little brief recap of Essence. Again, you can go back and watch that first video that I recorded, but really, Essence is the foundation. It's the place where we start as human beings when we want to, really get on the pathway of creating a life for ourselves. And the idea behind it is really that we have qualities of being, or an essence within us that has been with us since birth. And the way that I sort of like to make an example of this is, like, think about the qualities that people acknowledge of you as a young child. You'll often hear about parents who will say, Billy, when he was a child, he was very happy. He had lots of humor. He made us laugh. Or Christina was, very passionate and fiery, and she always got what she wanted. Those are things to stay attuned to, because they form the qualities or essence of who we are. And when you think about this in your own life, my hunch is that you have an idea of, like, the innate qualities within you, the qualities that you bring to the world. And oftentimes, when we are not as connected to them, when we've not been, um, we're sort of disconnected from it, it often feels like it's off in the distance, or it's like kind of shadowy or like confusing in a sense. So that's the place to really start, is like, what does it feel like for you? What are the things that people notice about you? And what do you ultimately feel about yourself? What qualities do you bring to the world? Do you bring confidence, humor, passion, excitement, joy, happiness, brilliance? Think about it. Think about those qualities that you bring to the world, and see what really resonates with you. And again, if you want more on this, you'll see, if you want some more support around this, in the first video I talked about, some ways of sort of cultivating this essence on your own path. So the conversation tonight is really diving into, well, life would be great if we always stayed in our essence, which fundamentally we do. Again, these qualities are with us from birth, but what often happens is that we get knocked out of them. So not necessarily knocked out of the qualities at our core, but as we go about our day-to-day lives, we get disconnected from our essence. We get basically triggered into a place of survival. And often from a place of survival, we act much differently. We make decisions much differently. We are being with people much differently than we are from essence. And so tonight's conversation is going to be really discussing about, you know, how we get knocked out and some of the ramifications of that. Some of the ramifications I've seen in my own life. There's been plenty. And also for others as well, others that I've been in conversation with. So this should be a good topic, and I hope you enjoy it. So the first place is really checking in on, where do we get knocked out in life? What pushes us off the course, pushes us out of that connection to the essence that we are? I'm just going to list off of a few, and I'd love to hear, as you're listening to this, some of the places you see for yourself. One of the places that I always refer to is our environment. How does your current environment knock you out of your essence? And this is a fundamental one, because our environments are so compelling, they're so impactful. You know, what around your house puts you into survival? What sort of triggers you? What conversations do you have, at work, that make you fearful or make you stressed out? Or what are the things in your world that push you into that survival mode, that fear, that discomfort? Those are some of the places to look in terms of how we get knocked out. Another place is our mind. And I want to be sort of clear on this one, because this can be a tough one, right? Oftentimes we'll just hear people say, well, change your mindset, right? If you're thinking negatively, change your mindset. Well, to be honest, sometimes it's not that easy to do, but it's a place to recognize, like, where are you in your thoughts? How do you cultivate your thinking that it actually takes you out of your connection to your essence? What are some of the thoughts that you have on a day-to-day basis? And, as a preview to where we're looking, where can you cultivate ways of coming back to essence? So if your mindset is faltering for you, or you feel like you're sort of on that downward trajectory, how can you shift something in what you're doing to sort of bring you back? So think on that and let me know what comes up for you. Another place is kind of like habituation. What are the automatic patterns, those automatic ways of being that come into your life that actually knock you out of your essence, right? So, I mean, a couple that I'll just throw off the top of my head is like, kind of in a reverse situation, almost like a numbing situation, but like, say we're in our essence, something triggers us, maybe a bad conversation or a tiring, burdensome day, and then we look to food to comfort us, or alcohol, stuff like that. And I'm just sort of picking things off the top of my head, uh, probably some from experience. Um, Things like this that sort of drive us into that survival mode, that place where we seek comfort to sort of make things normal. Again, it doesn't always have to be fear or anxiety or that type of thing. There's also numbing. There's also, a whole bunch of ways that we can sort of fall into survival to cope. So habituation is a big one, right? Where do we automatically fall into ways that sort of help us cope with life rather than being in our essence? Um, Another thing that I put too is daily events. This is a really common one that knocks us out of our essence and into survival, right? We get a flat tire, we wake up late for work, we have an argument with our spouse. The list goes on and on and on. And this is a really, really common place that both for myself and people that I get to talk to, were like, things are going great. We're feeling good. We had a good start to the morning. All of a sudden, that flat tire comes, or we get yelled at by our boss or criticized by our boss in front of a group, all of a sudden we're not in our essence anymore. We're not in a good place anymore. We're in that survival mode. Where can I hide? Where can I sort of minimize myself or sort of deal with getting through the day? And one of the things that I often find from this place, the daily sort of structure or this daily events that happen to us is like this is one of the most critical places that knocks people out, where they've been on their path, they've been sort of creating that forward motion for themselves, and they're aligned with their vision, their goals, and all of a sudden situation after situation happens, and now they're basically in survival mode. They're just trying to, contain what they have. And that's a really hard place to be, because what often happens is like that that sort of wave hits, we're out of our essence, we're just trying to survive, and the months go by and we kind of hit this point where it's like, oh, I had this thing, I had this fitness plan that was going well, or um, the list goes on, and now I'm in recovery mode to get back to where I was, rather than possibly even playing outside of that place, right? So you could look at fitness or relationships or your vision, and if you notice that tendency happening, that's a place to look, because often you're getting knocked into that survival mode. And let me be clear, this happens to me all the time. I go from essence to survival, back to essence. It's a daily um sort of tension that's happening. And so there is not immunity to this. If no matter how enlightened you are or how much work you've done, your capabilities within essence only can get enhanced over time, but so does your survival mechanism. So does your ego. That also enhances as you do too. So it's a constant tension. And it's important to know that, because the moment that we think that we've defeated our survival capabilities, or that sort of place, we're in trouble. So it's a place to reflect on. So just from here, I'd love to hear some of the comments that you might have, some of the thoughts or insights that are coming up for you. Like what's coming up for you in this conversation. So from here, I've talked about some of the ways we got knocked out, how it sort of pushes us into survival mode, and then I really want to share some places for support. What might support look like from this place? How do we get ourselves connected back to essence? So, a few places off the top of my mind would be support. So, if you find that in life that your support is very minimal, a lot of these conversations you're having with yourself, you're trying to get through life on your own, that should be a warning sign, because as human beings, we crave connection. We need connection to thrive for the most part. I mean, obviously, everybody's got different, um, different ways that they can create connection in their lives, or different capacities with it. But like I know for myself, especially as I've gone deeper and deeper in this work and sort of opened up myself more, I actually crave more connection. So that's one place to look, is what are your actual support structures. Whether it's having a friend that you can be in conversation with, maybe to vent or just share what's going on in your life, and you've got that trusted source, that's a place to look. And then from there, you can always look for other capacities. And I would say that there's never too much, right? Maybe you have two or three people in your life. Having somebody who will be willing to have those conversations with you, but is also willing to stand for some of the greater things that you want in your life. They won't just allow you to vent or complain about life, but will actually like be curious about your life, ask you questions, and help you on that path. That's a place to look. Groups, looking into your community for groups, whether it's with a church or a men's group or a women's group, like these are places to look as well, really fostering community around you. Um, that's a big piece, having people to talk to have conversations with, that breaks that pattern of taking on this journey alone. And oftentimes, when we are alone on this journey, we think that our situation is extreme and we're the only ones like this. And in my experience, as we get connected more and more to people in our lives, that like we all are on this journey together. We all have our immense capabilities, our immense qualities of being, our essence that is absolutely shining and brilliant and loving within us. And we all have our survival mechanisms, our ways that we get drawn into fear and frustration and being scared. We all have them. And so that's a real place to just check in with yourself of like, are you hiding yourself from the world because you feel like the only one? And is there a place for you to come back into that connection with others or embrace more connection, build that support structure around you? It's a great place to look. Another place to look, I was probably going to mention this one first, but I went in a different order, is looking to distinguish these patterns in your life. So, this is a really beautiful place, right? We're talking about essence. And again, in the last video I covered, gave some practices to how you can look at generating your essence or just kind of bringing more of that connection to who you are, into reality in a sense, into sort of your awareness. And also looking at the patterns of survival. So when we can start to distinguish these things, we start to get almost like a sense of elevation over them or vision over them. Very, very critical. Oftentimes, what I see is that when we're not connected to our essence and we're not aware of our survival mechanisms, that our life is kind of on autopilot. We fall into our survival mechanism or fear, and we don't know. We kind of get a sense of what's going on, but we kind of hit this point where it's like, oh my God, I've hit a wall and I don't know what happened. Well, actually, if you start to become aware of these patterns, you can then start to distinguish like, okay, like when I get cut off in traffic, this is what happens to me. When my boss calls me out in front of the group and makes me feel less than worthy, this is how I react. And this is what happens to me. I go home and I end up watching Netflix or you know, uh, end up getting angry, these types of things. So being able to distinguish the patterns is key. Um, and this is a place often that a coach can support you. So again, coming back to those support structures, looking at a group who can support you in that distinguishing or help you see it, or even working with a coach, trained in ontological work, they're going to be able to distinguish these patterns for you. Um, Hey, David, good to see you. So, David, you're saying, yeah, I spent many years on that autopilot and in that state. Absolutely. Me too. Like years of feeling sorry for myself, feeling like a victim, resorting to playing video games and like checking out from the world. Like that was me in a sense, that place of autopilot. And David, I'm curious for you, like what were some of the initial pathways that helped you sort of break free from that or get out of that sort of cycle that was happening in your life? So, and then another place to look to is what I would call coming back to being, coming back to your essence. And this probably sounds like big, and it's not. Really cultivating the ways of your life of how do you bring yourself back to your essence? How do you bring yourself back to your qualities of who you are? And another way of looking at this is like, how do you actually source yourself to come back to that place where you feel happy and whole and complete? So, places that you may want to look are things like meditation, going for a walk, having a conversation with a friend, um, you know, drinking water, eating well, getting enough sleep. Like these are all places to look in terms of sourcing yourself back to being. Oftentimes we make this more complicated than it has to be, and in some cases maybe it has to be complicated. Maybe we need to sort of go through these motions and go through some of the muck that's in our lives to be able to like get past that wall in a sense. But this is a real place to start in terms of sourcing yourself back to being. So that might be a place, in fact, to reflect on as we start to wind down this video. One, how can you start to distinguish the patterns that are happening in your life? What are the patterns that you notice yourself going to be connected to your essence? What are some of the patterns that you know yourself when you fall back into survival or fear? So that's a place to start, is looking to distinguish those patterns. Um, Another place to look at is, like I said, finding people to be in conversation with. It's easy to try and the easy thing in life is to take on this journey on our own, to read a book, feel like we're sourced through the book, and then sort of stay in our bubble. The place to really be seen and heard is being in connection with others and finding a way that, from starting small to just maybe being in a group and spending more time just listening and hearing what's happening in the group, to maybe becoming more of an active member or even a leader, whatever that looks like to you. But that's a real important place, is coming into connection with other human beings to see where others are at, to see where maybe you can even support others or others can support you. And as I mentioned, as I'm getting sort of away from the practice. So the practice there would be to just sort of start looking at, like, hey, where can I bring more connection into my life? Where can I actually be connected with people on this journey with me? And the last place I'd have you look at is those practices of coming back to being. What are some of the ways that you can really source yourself in life and truly bring yourself back to those places where you feel good and whole and complete? So that's what I got for you today. I'd love to hear some of your takeaways, some of the insights that you have, some of the places that you might practice, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, if this content is resonating with you, if there's stuff that you would like me to speak to more of, please feel free to share it, whether it's in the comments or through Messenger. I'd love to hear what's going on for you. What are some of the topics that you would love to have discussion around? And I'll find a way to bring it on these lives. So thanks for checking it out, David. Thanks for those of you who are going to check this out later on. Uh, really take good care of yourself this week, and yeah, look forward to doing this with you again soon. Bye for now.